My name is Olena Banerjee, and I'm a reporter for Education Week. In January 2026, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency sent thousands of officers to the twin cities of St. Paul and Minneapolis in Minnesota. The agents showed up in and around immigrant communities and near schools that cater to many of the children who live in these communities. It was a scary and confusing time for these families. If their kids went to school, would they be safe? I wanted to find out how one principal from Minneapolis managed to keep her school running and what another principal in Maryland, a few thousand miles away, learned from her experience. This is my conversation with Mary Pat Cumming and James Aldrich. I know that you and James have connected. Obviously, you've been on the board and over many other things. How did this connection come to be when you started to talk about, okay, what happens if ICE shows up in our schools? Like, how did the principal to principal connection happen? Maybe James, maybe we can start with you there. Yeah.
I heard about what was happening in Minneapolis and got a chance to get on a call with Mary Pat and just asked what was happening. And she was beginning to, she started talking about what she was experiencing. When principals see and hear about those things, our hearts automatically go out and say, this could be any school, right, in America. And more specifically, we started to get word from our superintendent and from other spaces that there's a possibility that there was going to be an increased presence of ICE in the Silver Spring, in the Maryland, Montgomery County area. Again, nothing confirmed, but at that point, I called Mary Pat again and just say, hey, what were the lessons you learned? And Mary Pat just shared some just great tidbits that I thought every principal needed to hear. And after that, I said, I talked to Mary Pat. I said, hey, would you be interested in just you pulling together some principals and then pulling some principals together on the Maryland, on the Montgomery County side, just to have a conversation?
When James and I had this conversation about doing this to create this network moment that we had, was we strategically said, let's make sure we have an elementary, a middle, and a high school principal at a minimum, right? Because the experience for elementary, middle, and high were very different depending upon what level you were at. And so being able to share those things about even like recess planning, which is something that as a high school principal, I don't think about. It was incredibly impactful for our elementary colleagues to say, these are the things you need to be thinking about at an elementary setting.
I think that, well, I would say that what started our relationship was that we already had a relationship, right? We were already connected. So to be able to pick up the phone and have a conversation like that, to me, was just great. But then to be able to bring principals in the same space, I think it was just priceless.
So having the cross pollination of a K-12 system of principals in a network was critically important for this conversation. It couldn't just be focused on high school.
I remember that resonated with other principals was around what happens when you have staff members who want to protest or who would like to support a student by doing X, Y, and Z. And to just listen to one particular principal from Minneapolis who actually had the experience of one of the teachers actually being picked up by ICE and how the other staff members wanted to respond really resonated, right? Because that principal found themselves in a place where they had to say, I know what I would want to do as the individual. That's different than what I need to do as a principal. And as a principal, it was about putting students first. And if 5 or 6 of those, teachers who wanted to go and support this one teacher who maybe got picked up during the protests by ICE, they felt like that would impact the functioning of the school building. Another one that was also top of mind, that was relatively easy to do, was something as simple as just make sure that your students have up-to-date parent contact information, right?
Even like protocols when someone shows up here asking for a student, whether it's someone from the county or someone from the law enforcement saying, I need to speak with so-and-so, we have protocols already in place, right?
Since we talked about, structures and how sort of these external factors, external forces may impact structures like recess, or how do you get kids onto the bus, or like just having that situational awareness, like maybe that wasn't a thing before, but now since schools aren't designated safe spaces anymore, what are some of those things that now, structurally you guys in Minneapolis will always think of?
One of the things I can think of right away is arrival and dismissal, and that doesn't matter if you're high school, middle, or elementary. And one of our experiences here in Minneapolis was that we actually had ICE presence during arrival one day, in less than 2 blocks from our school, and that immediately triggered a response that we have in place. And one of our responsibilities was to get the kids into the building safely, right? That in the building is the safest place for them to be. And I think when you're thinking about what was the outcome of that later on, it is that we have continued to have more adult presence outside, more adult presence both at arrival and dismissal, ensuring student safety. And are we necessarily looking at this time for ICE presence? Not necessarily, but it certainly has increased our vigilance in that we have put in place for all students. And that's happening still at the elementary. And that didn't just happen with, schools. It happened with communities coming together and doing more block patrols and more assistance on corners, crossing streets for little ones versus our older students. Remember that you are the voice of your school. And then secondarily, also remember to have those quiet conversations in the places that you can to hopefully make change if possible. That they can cross pollinate their leadership is really important to be able to have additional voices coming into their thoughts, right? As well as someone potentially to reach out to. And I think this format I think is nice for that, because it also creates an opportunity that if someone's listening to this and they're curious about anything that either James or I have said, that we would stand ready for them to connect with us. I would not be at all surprised. I would not be at all surprised or taken aback if someone said, I saw you, or I read your article, or I saw you on a magazine, or I saw your podcast, or whatever it is. That's the connection we need, and it's to encourage our principal colleagues to not to be, again, I'm using this word vulnerable again, but to be vulnerable, to say like, I can reach out to somebody else if I need to, and that it's not in isolation that we do this job.